Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you guys. I'll give you a bit of background just of who I am in case you don't know me and the story. I set up a company called Innocent, which is a juice and smoothie company. I did it with my two closest friends, and we started out with just £500 worth of fruit. That was literally our first days of trading. We bought £500 worth of fruit, we turned it into smoothies and started selling them from a market stall, and it gave us the confidence to give up our jobs and do it full time. And after a lot of hard work and a few right decisions and a lot of luck, 15 years later, we built a business that was turning over north of £200 million and was in sale in 15 countries across Europe. And we exited the business, selling it to Coca-Cola last year in a deal that valued it at over $500 million. So for three guys, one from Huddersfield in Yorkshire, to go from £500 to over $500 million was something that way exceeded all expectations. And I think within that, a central truth that we were an outlier, that things went much better than we ever could have imagined or dreamt. There were several drivers of why that success happened, and I believe a principal one of those was because of the ethical stance that the business had and the drive for doing good that was built into the DNA of Innocent. And I just wanted to talk a bit about that today, about the sort of how I think pursuing not just money, but money and other social benefits is a brilliant approach to investment and success and wealth creation in the 21st century. And I myself try to, as best I can, to sort of live and invest by these principles. So the money that I've got out of Innocent, I now allocate a material part to investing in new entrepreneurs that are coming through with ideas that have both financial but also social benefits, and also investments that I make in companies such as Cytox, Diabetic Shoe Company, Arrowhead, Plethora, all companies that are based here today, which I've invested in for two reasons. One, because I think they're going to make the world a lot better. And secondly, I think they're hopefully going to make me and the other shareholders a lot richer. And I have absolutely no problem with that. I've always had a belief in you actually do good by making money, but you can do even more good by the way that you make the money and what you do with it. So that's sort of the central thesis I just wanted to talk through today. But I just wanted to set it into a bit of sort of overly simplistic, but I think hopefully truthful context of the way that the world is today and how that's changed in relatively recent times. And there's the first fundamental truth there, that we live now in a world where I think capitalism, where business has won. It is now the predominant organizing idea and influence in the societies in which we live. It wasn't, of course, always that way. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the central and principal organizing idea for society was based around religion and religious ideology. That was the thing that shaped life more than any one influence. And that was essentially true until the sort of the beginning of the 20th century, to a greater or lesser extent, where sort of political ideology took over, the era of the Great Wars and the era of the Cold War, the era of East versus West. They were essentially the sort of the trigonometry points by which the principal decisions and movements of society were influenced by. But it's only now, in the sort of the late 20th and early 21st century, that there's a fundamental truth that we all know, and that's one of the reasons why we're sat here, is that this fact says it all. Of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are corporations. The business now is the single biggest driving force and influencer on the way that the world is. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think economic growth, business, capitalism, it's achieved many brilliant things, hasn't it? I mean, it's something that we've all got to be hugely, intensely grateful for. If it wasn't for the miracle of modern consumerism and economic growth, then we would all still be living in mud huts with our teeth falling out, hoping at best to reach it to the age of 50. And it has been the organization of economies and the industrialization of the world that has allowed us all to get out of that quagmire. And of course, it is a unique contribution that business makes to society. Business is the only thing that actually creates economic wealth. It's the driver of everything else in society. You cannot have schools and hospitals and roads without governments that raise taxes, but you can't have taxes if people don't earn money, and you can't earn money if you don't have a job, and there is no jobs if there's no business. So business is the thing that is driving the development of society, allowing us to pay for the things that make us a better society. It's also, of course, true of charities as well. Charities can't raise money unless people have money, and you can't have money if you don't have a job. So the pursuit of, as investors, to invest in businesses that we believe are going to be successful, that are going to create wealth, that are going to create business, are going to create jobs. We're doing good simply by the pursuit of trying to make money. I think that is, the first fundamental truth. But of course, another fundamental truth is, even though I would say it's mainly been the upsides of economic development and us living in a more integrated world where we trade and we share and we get richer, there of course have been some deeply bad unintended consequences, and it is a scientifically, objectively analyzed, established fact that we are burning up the world, that global warming is the result of man-made industrial enterprise and the associated pollutants of it, and it's happening, and it's biting, and it's only going to bite down harder over the next 50 years unless we do something about it. We also live in a world where today, literally today, 50% of the children in the world are going hungry, are suffering from acute malnutrition, which is going to affect their ability to develop their brains and their physiology for the rest of their lives. And that's concurrent with societies now that have obesity rates of 25% plus. So you've got a sort of crazy situation, which I know this is obvious stuff, we know it already, but it is also a bizarre and wasteful thing to say about the world and its economic structure, that we have so much oversupply and so much undersupply, and it's just a matter of distribution, not absolute quantities of things. So we do live in a world where business is good, where it has achieved great things, but it's having some unintended consequences. But I think it's also true that we can't ignore it anymore. We live in the era and the advancement of supercomputers, of big data, where things are increasingly knowable. For the last 2,000 years, things have been done on superstition or supposition, whereas now it's actually increasingly we can understand what things are. We can understand what disease is. We can map the DNA sequence. Cytox know, they've got the insights of how to track and to early test for Alzheimer's. There's things that you can use now, things that we never knew before. And of course, with the internet and the advance of digital communications, again, it's another trite, obvious thing to say, but it's absolutely fundamental. Nothing greater in the history of humanity, other than possibly the inventing of the printing press, the ability now for anyone in the world to communicate to everyone in the world for free at the touch of a button. And the so what to that is that we can't, if we're investors, if we're shareholders, if we're business owners, if we're entrepreneurs, we can't expect to get away from it. We can't pretend that we don't know about the consequences of the business systems that we run or invest in. It will, maybe not all of us will get caught out, but some of us will, and increasingly everyone will. If you're doing stuff, if your business is doing things that is actually having a depleting effect on the societies and communities in which it operates, it will come and bite us on our collective arses. So I think what that means is, if you sort of believe that sort of thesis to this point, businesses, brands, these economic organized structures called companies, they give us the ability to not just create the opportunities, but to also tackle some of the problems that have been created by chasing these opportunities in the first place, and to benefit hugely from doing so. And I'm an absolute optimist, but I believe actually there are these sunlit uplands in capitalism and in business and investment, that the more that you chase ethics, the greater you're going to get in terms of profits. Not always so. You might find sometimes as a trade-off, but actually the really, really stellar deals, they max out on both in terms of profit and ethics. It's not just me as some sort of slight sort of pseudo-hippie banging on about it. Michael E. Porter, probably the most respected management business consultant in the world, said exactly the same thing, that businesses, given what they are, essentially a community of human beings with huge amounts of talent and skill and resources at their disposal, as an entity, beat any other type of organized entity on the planet for being able to tackle social ills and problems. and to benefit from them. But it's not even new thinking. I grew up in Yorkshire as a kid, and I was taken to this man's hometown. It's a place called Saltaire on the outskirts of Bradford. This is a guy called Sir John Titus Salt. He was a big industrialist back in the sort of the late 19th century, and he ran a huge textile mill on the outskirts of Bradford. And one day went to see where his workers lived and saw in the slums of Bradford just how awful the human conditions were. And so built a whole village around his mill and called it Saltaire, where he provided free housing, free healthcare, water, sanitation, religious places of worship, everything to basically organize a healthy community around, and gave it all for free to his workers, who in return were more loyal and less diseased and worked harder and had less sick days off, and he became the richest industrialist of his era because he recognized that there was profit in looking after the workers because it delivered a better long-term bottom line. And that sort of influenced us with Innocent, this idea of, well, can we dig down and double down harder on actually doing things in a better way, not just so we feel better about ourselves, but so we make more money. I think that was the fundamental driver of Innocent. We talked about, we want to leave things a little bit better than we found them. That was a phrase that we had on the walls at fruit towers, on the back of the toilet doors, and it was all about, let's have a net positive effect with the business and the way that we do business. And I think it's how we thought about it in terms of, if you really want to understand how you can make money and do good and how business can be having this net positive effect, you have to think essentially about three aspects. You have to think firstly, and I would argue most importantly, about the nature of the business. What is it that the business is in the business of making? Secondly, then how does it go about making it? What is the sort of the costs and the consequences of its supply chain and the way it operates and the way it procures and the way it manufactures? And how can you reduce those impacts? And then thirdly, what does one do with the proceeds that you hopefully get from it, the profit that one makes? Where does that go? What's that being used to fund? And at Innocent, we had a sort of that threefold approach and tried to make sure each of those areas, in terms of what we did, how we did it, and what we did with the proceeds, we were always trying to make better than the day before, always leave things better than we found them. So the business was structured around making healthy products. We made a cast iron guarantee to ourselves and to our shareholders and to our customers that we would only ever make things that were net nutritionally positive for people. 2 of your 5 a day, 3 of your 5 a day, things that were high fiber, low fat, full of all the good stuff. Secondly, that we would, through sourcing ethically, putting environmentally friendly packaging, and using a supply chain that had the highest standards in terms of water, landfill, and electricity usage, we made sure that the business system was increasingly on the mythical goal towards full sustainability. And thirdly, as a company, we made a commitment to give a minimum of 10% of the profits to charity. Now, that was the minimum. In fact, over our tenureship, we gave away 60% of the accumulated net profits of the business over the 15 years that we're in business for. And that went essentially to a separate registered charity that invested in rural development in the countries where our fruit came from, doing everything from protecting the tribal rights of disenfranchised women in India through to biodiversity protection in Costa Rica and everything in between. So it had this sort of threefold approach to do something that's good for the world, do it in a way that's more environmentally sustainable, and then share some of the proceeds that you get. And I think it wasn't the only reason why Innocent was successful. There's many reasons. One is that we got our timing right. Second is that we got lucky. Thirdly, we made a product that the world needed and wanted. But having that sort of ethical underpinning and drive, it absolutely did explain some of the reason why we were the outliers, some of the reason why we turned £500 into $500 million. And I think it was best evidenced by, you see the payback in three ways. Firstly, and most importantly, it gave us, and it gave our consumers a reason to connect, to be loyal, to support our brand versus someone else's fruit juice brand. It wouldn't make you buy a smoothie just because the smoothie company was giving a percentage of its profits to charity. That doesn't make you want a smoothie. But if you're faced with two alternative smoothies and all other things are equal, then having that ethical underpinning, it just made the reason for people to buy us rather than buy the competition. And in our world, which is FMCG, that's all you're ever trying to do, just get someone to buy your brand rather than someone else's brand. So it gave us a greater sort of consumer franchise, a higher degree of loyalty, a reason for people to buy us and us again. Secondly, it gave us an opportunity to build the second most important relationship. I think the most important relationship you ever have as a business is with your consumer. The second most important for us is with our retailers. So over the 15 years in business, we had these different social ethical initiatives. One of our most favorite one was called the Innocent Big Knit, where we got volunteers to make little woolen hats. You can see a few of them on there on the bottles, and they would send them in. And for every bottle that was sold with a hat on, we'd give 50p to Age Concern. And it started in its first year. We got volunteers to knit 3,000 hats, and it grew year after year. And in its 10th year, last year, we had over 2 million little woolen hats, all knitted by volunteers. But we did it in conjunction with Sainsbury's, who are our single most important customer. They're our biggest revenue partner. They're one of our longest serving sort of commercial partnerships. And doing that in conjunction with them, we meant we had a unique relationship. We shared the credit, we shared the work, we shared the fundraising. And I think, and again, in a small way, it's helped invest in that relationship, given the business greater sustainability. And then thirdly, and I think the biggest benefit of all you get as a business if you're chasing this idea of not just making money, but making money and doing some good as well, it allowed us to have a stronger, more intellectually curious, more intellectually mature, hardworking, loyal employees. And that really is, in my experience, that is how you win long-term in business. It's who has got the best brains, more motivated, more committed, working for longer, and working harder. If you can get a disproportionate amount of loyalty and skill and talent in your building via employees, then that is going to be the biggest long-term driver of success. And it's absolutely what we look for. As myself, Adam and John now, we have an investment company called Jam Jar, which invests in new entrepreneurs. It's absolutely what we look for. We look for try and look into the brains of the people and the team, and their ability to energize and attract talent and reward it and retain it and motivate it. And having this sort of strong ethical underpinning, again, it served the bottom line. The loyalty and the efforts of your team are ultimately going to be the biggest way to harvest success, and having that ethical slug to the story of the company, I think, helped harness that. And so you put all those sort of three things together: the ability to make a stronger relationship with your consumer, an ability to foster stronger relationships with your commercial partners, an ability to capture the hearts and minds of your team members. It just ultimately feeds into the biggest and most important thing overall as a business, which is your brand. You know, certainly from a consumer, anything in the consumer industry, the most important asset you're ever going to have, it's not the building, it's not the technology, it's not the actual people, it's the brand. And we felt that, and we found that having this sort of ethical side to the business, in addition to it being a great quality product, in addition to it to be at the right price and the right distribution, the ethics just added this extra 10%, the secret sauce that got us noticed, that got us remembered, and allowed the brand to become stronger. And actually, since we've left the business, the ethical side of the company has become even more into focus by the new team that are running it, and realized that in the world of fruit juice, it's a real USP. I can't claim that our orange juice is particularly better than someone else's orange juice, but I can claim it's better for the world in the way that it's made. And so if we can match on quality and beat on ethics, it gives people a reason to buy. And I'm just going to show you a 1-minute advert which Innocent have done recently, which sort of brings to life the fact that we think there's real economic competitive advantage in building an ethical story and telling people about it.
They say all things are connected, but we don't really know how much. Take Mark. He just wants something to drink, so he gets an Innocent smoothie because he knows that it tastes good, which in turn does him some good. But what he doesn't know is that he started a chain of good. Because he chose this smoothie and 10% of Innocent's profits go to charity, the good keeps going. So Janet and Otai receive a cow, which gives them milk, which makes her strong. The cow fertilizes the soil that grows these, which she can sell at the market, so they can get their son Joseph a bike. so he can go to a good school and study hard to realize his dreams of becoming an engineer.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, seriously, thank you, Mark. You've made the world a better place and you don't even know it. Mark, you're my hero. Innocent smoothies. Tastes good, does good.
And so so I think we found, certainly in our experience, that innocent sort of pursuit of trying to do good also led to the pursuit of money, and the pursuit of money also led to the pursuit of being able to do good. It was a totally symbiotic relationship. And actually, again, I'm going back to Michael Porter, so you don't just think this is just an experience unique to innocent. If you chase after these ideas of doing good, you can also sharpen your commercial advantage in business. If you find the thing that your organization's best suited to help with, it further can hone the talents and the skills of that organization. My favorite example of this is Microsoft, right? And let's face it, Microsoft has had no problem over its years of making money, so it's one of the most known and biggest success stories of the modern era. And I met a lady who worked at Microsoft who told me the story of a local office back in 2008 during the Kosovan refugee crisis, and they saw on their way into work there's these refugee camps of people, literally just tens of thousands of displaced people in their tents in this refugee camp. And the guys at Microsoft got talking, thinking, well, that we're seeing this happen almost on our doorstep. What can we do to help? And a few of the engineers went down one night to the refugee camp and started speaking to the NGO that was running it. And they realized one of the fundamental issues with displaced people is no one can keep a track of who's lost who, who's got identity papers, who's from where, whose son is looking for whose mother, and vice versa. And the Microsoft engineers saw this as basically a sort of data coding problem. So they went and spent 3 nights, literally, and this isn't folklore, this actually happened, coding. They took laptops and coded from the tents in the refugee camp and built the working prototype of a database to allow the NGO to capture the data of all the displaced people, and started hooking up family members with family members and being able to reissue identity papers. And that code, which was created in the refugee camp of the Kosovo refugee crisis, has formed the software now that is used by every NGO in every displaced person camp in every refugee crisis across the world. And it was a brilliant example of Microsoft didn't actually pony up the cash. As a floated company, maybe that's a slightly harder thing to do, but they ponied up the resource, and by the resource doing what they did best, the resource got better at it, and they created an amazing bit of software which is now out in the world helping save the world. And these are the guys from Microsoft. And I think if people that look like that can help save the world, then none of us have got any excuse, right? We can all be doing our bit. So that's basically the sort of the principles I've found to be true, that we are all here as potential investors, as entrepreneurs, as shareholders, as business owners. We can achieve amazing things for ourselves and our communities by absolutely trying to do business in the best way, by chasing, the thing that people talk about now, the triple bottom line. And it's going to, the amount of benefits we get from it, not just the money, but I think we also have to create a future memory based on where the world is going. And actually, if you look at the day today, I think only 200 years ago, slavery was seen as to be a completely acceptable part and parcel of how you did business, of how you took out costs in your supply chain, and it was great, it made absolute sense. Whereas now, it is completely and utterly disgraceful as a concept and completely unimaginable. And I think if you cast a future memory of what it's going to be like in 50 years' time or 100 years' time, are we really, as consumers, as connected consumers that can communicate to other connected consumers, that can vote with our wallets, are we really going to support businesses that are doing bad? Are we really going to support businesses that are raping the planet rather than adding to the planet? Who knows, it's the future, but my strong assertion is this, that it is the businesses that take seriously the idea of doing good for their shareholders, for their employees, for their communities, will long-term build the strongest consumer franchises that will have the greatest amount of profit within them, and ultimately give it the best returns for the shareholders. So my whole thesis is that we walk around here and we look to where we can put our money, which is essentially votes and the life force that we're giving to any other business, can we think about not just about making money, but let's of course think about that first, because we're investors and that's our job. Our job is to make money for ourselves and the world, but let's think about make money and what can we also do? What can we back that's going to have a net positive effect in addition to the economic wealth that we're going to create? I think it makes us look better down the golf club. I think it means our bank accounts are going to be stronger. I think we'll have a greater sort of spiritual satisfaction from doing it. And in my experience, it just makes it a lot more fun. Anyway, so that's been the innocent experience and my sense of let's chase after making money and doing good. Thanks very much indeed.